Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, the podcast that celebrates the multiple hats we wear and the juggling acts we perform in life. Whether you're parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum, navigating the ever-evolving healthcare industry, or building a more inclusive and impactful world, this is your space to find connection, inspiration, and growth. Together, we'll share stories, tackle challenges, and explore how innovation and inclusion create better outcomes for everyone. Because no matter the spectrum, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Kaufer.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the lighter side of the spectrum. I am David Kaufer, and today's episode is deeply personal, what I'm really excited to talk to you about. For those of you, I should say, who joined us in part one, we explored the foundations of brain enhancement therapy. We're going to be talking more about this in part two, and we're going to be talking about it more specifically about how we are using it in our family with our 19-year-old non-speaking autistic son, Stone, our incredible son, and his experience with the therapy so far, and kind of talk you through it so that you can get a better idea in terms of how it works from a practical standpoint. And you'll hear some of the things that we've seen, the changes, understand, why this work matters, not just for non-speakers, but also for lots of others who are navigating the spectrum. So again, I'm joined by Dr. Nanda Sattva, who's the clinical director at Brain Enhancement Center, as well as Angela Aronica, who's the CEO of Brain Enhancement Center. So thanks, guys, for joining me again for part two today.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here, David.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to get into here, so let's just jump into it. For those who had not had a chance to hear part one, Angela, do you want to talk about kind of what is brain enhancement therapy and give them kind of a quick overview and why they should listen?
Yes, absolutely. So neurotherapy is another term for brain enhancement. And the approach that we're using is a combination of three non-invasive supportive technologies that help optimize brain function. And one of those is neurostimulation. So neurostimulation uses very tiny, safe electrical signals, much softer than anything you might imagine. And this helps the brain shift out of patterns that aren't working well. And it also is like giving the brain a gentle reminder to reconnect and rebalance itself. So essentially what we're doing is we're training the brain to reconnect, to create new pathways, and to strengthen existing ones. And that's what helps the brain to operate more efficiently. For Stone, this helps for things such as motor planning, so he can speak more easily, and regulation, so that he feels calmer and more present.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk more about that in terms of what we're seeing a couple months into this, but that's a great overview.
And then there are two other modalities. I'll be quick.
That's great.
We also use photobiomodulation, which is light therapy. It's really just a fancy word for using specific types of lights, such as infrared, to nourish and energize the brain at a cellular level. So there are certain wavelengths of light that can actually stimulate the mitochondria, which is the little batteries inside each brain cell. And this gives the brain more energy to repair, rewire, and to grow. So basically, the lights give Stone's brain a little extra boost of energy, like sunlight for growing plants. And then the third is PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And this sends a gentle, rhythmic pulse of electromagnetic energy into the body to help the cells recharge and communication pathways to open up. So think of it like tuning an instrument. PEMF helps Stone's body and brain tune themselves back to their natural healthy rhythms. So this supports relaxation, better sleep, reduces inflammation, and gives an improved overall brain-body connection. So we combine all three of these to support Stone's brain from different angles, helping to give him more energy, better communication, better regulation, without overwhelming his system. And most importantly, everything we do is personalized to his needs. So we listen to Stone's brain, body, his moods, his energy, and we adjust as he progresses. So you can kind of think of the neurostimulation, neurotherapy overall as gardening. So neurostimulation is like loosening up the soil. Photobiomodulation is like shining the sunlight. And PEMF is like watering the roots. So we're creating the best
Ooh,
environment.
I like that analogy.
Absolutely. And that allows us to create the best environment possible for stone's natural intelligence and abilities to blossom.
Yeah, that's a great overview. Thanks. And one of the things I think that will again resonate with listeners and viewers who are in this journey, who have children or caregivers of those who are autistic, and particularly those with non-speakers, is just knowing, uh, that there have been a lot of other approaches, biomedical and others, and understanding that there's blockages, there's something happened with the brain-body disconnect, right? And so that's why you see a lot of biomedical approaches, diets, supplements, medications in some cases, B12 shots, a wide variety of things, because there's been the understanding that, hey, there's something let's try to help heal or fix the brain as much as we can. And what's so amazing about this is it actually directly applies to the brain. Like, this is actually directly related to the brain. Before we get into some of the nitty gritty, I just, again, for listeners who don't know, in terms of Stone's journey, I just want to give a quick background. Again, he's 19, as I mentioned, he's non-speaking. He's been communicating for about 2.5 years now, utilizing the spelling to communicate methodology, the spelling methodology, and basically pointing. He started with pointing with the letter boards, now communicates primarily on the keyboard. And since he began communicating, of course, just, it's been totally life-changing. He's moved out of, remedial intensive ed classes, is now approaching high school graduation, taking biology and other courses. And we've discovered that he's brilliant, but he's super jazzed with twofold: the possibility of, like you said, being able to speak, actually being able to have his body do what its brain is trying to do. And like I said, we can get into that a little bit more later. But that's something that we saw from day one, in terms of the therapy, is that he was able to utter a word that we had never heard before. I'm sure you guys remember that, right? We were sitting there. He was, towards the tail end of the therapy. And we'll put pictures up. Producer Dave, I've got pictures to show kind of what it looks like, because I want people to be able to visually see that, because it's hard to kind of paint the picture in your mind. It's pretty chill. But again, we were sitting there talking about indoor playground, right? And then all of a sudden he blurted out trampoline, 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 and it's a word he'd never said before, and something he even admitted later when he and I were debriefing and talking, that said surprised him that it actually came out. But why don't we back up and kind of talk about the process? And Dr. Nanda, you can talk about kind of how it kind of begins, maybe with the brain mapping and what that does.
Yeah. I think if anybody didn't listen to last, try not to spend too much time on that. We went into it pretty detailed last time. That's the real diagnostic secret sauce, I think, to neurotherapy. And it's amazing in mental health. Mental health is one of the only fields that doesn't regularly measure the organ they're treating. And so
Right.
brain map is very much like your car. If you have a problem with the engine, you go to a mechanic and they actually run a diagnostic test and they can evaluate the different components of the engine. When we do a brain map, we're able to measure the electrical activity in each area of the brain and then identify the regions that are not functioning as well as others, or overactive or underactive, or areas that are not connecting well, and evaluate just the way the brain's performing, essentially. And it's a functional test. So we do a QEEG, quantitative electroencephalography. That's been around for over 100 years. It's super well researched. And now technology has gotten better and has allowed us to be able to look much more closely at the different regions of the brain and identify the type of brainwave pattern that's being produced. And each brainwave is responsible for a different state of being. And so when we can identify areas, specifically, they go from slow to fast, and it's kind of like a dimmer switch, where if they're slow, it's like the dimmer is turned down, and that can be an area of disengagement for the brain. That area is not as function as the dimmer switch is down, so it's not
Yeah.
working as well. The power's down, or it's just offline a little bit. And that's Yeah, and so that's kind of the process of identifying the regions that we want to work on, and then everything that Angela said about the modalities is the treatments that we use and we apply, and it's very much like physical therapy for the brain. So I love the gardening example. That was the first time I've heard it, but it was beautiful. Free example of its physical therapy, and that it's like when we do the stimulation, that's like putting the brain on a treadmill. So the brain automatically is adapting to the specific frequency that we want, which can elevate or decrease activation in a certain region. And then the lights and the energy are able to keep the brain on the treadmill. So we're giving the brain energy so that it can keep training and it can keep making these healthful adaptations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good overview. So let's apply it in terms of with Stone. Again, when you first met him and he kind of came in for his QEEG, his brain mapping, was there anything that stood out to you about his brain activity, or, any markers or patterns that jumped out initially?
All right. Yeah. So let me jump on and I'll do a screen share. And, this is a bit like Chinese to people if you don't speak Chinese.
It's totally like yeah, I'll vouch for that. And having sat through a couple of these still, it's a different language, but
It's one that we're always learning and we're getting better at. But so on the left-hand side is Stone's original eyes open and eyes closed brain maps. And on the right side are his follow-ups after about 15, I believe, sessions, 15 or so sessions.
okay, yeah.
And so each of these little waves determines the frequency. And then, so an easy one to spot is an alpha brainwave. An alpha brainwave is pretty. It's sinusoidal monomorphic, which means that it looks the same as it goes through the recording. And so in eyes closed, we expect to see this anyway, and won't get into too much of it. But one of the
Keep it high level for us.
one of the themes that we can see on the originals is we're trying to identify with learning disabilities and autism, and there's oftentimes a presence of slower brain activity. So like the whether was developed in utero, or whether that was a regressive autism after a vaccine injury, or any sort of autism, we're trying to help to reconnect and restore optimal performance. And so one pattern we can see is that on the original, we can see some of these underlying larger waveform patterns. And the larger waveforms are a slow wave. And so when there's present, specifically what we're looking at here are some delta waves. Delta is indicative of some type of brain injury, whether that was in utero or some brain type of problem it's like a signal.
Something.
Yeah, that area is offline. And so we can see that that's kind of going on specifically in the frontotemporal regions, which is where our speech and language production is being created.
Right.
In the front temporal, we have Broca's area, which is a phonological production of sound and speech. And then in the posterior temporal parietal region, we have Wernicke's area, which is an area of comprehension, language comprehension and understanding and integration. And so these larger waveforms being present with Stone were largely, and this is the beauty of the brain, is that when people come in and tell us their story, the objective data in the brain almost every single time matches and makes sense with what somebody's experiencing.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's actually able to show us a picture, and it's then objective data. Where on the left, again, we can see these larger waveforms, and then on the right, we can see after treatment that those larger waveforms are much less present. They're much more subtle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a visible difference for those, if people are listening. I mean, there's a visible difference when you look at the pattern lines. I mean, they look much calmer compared to the first one.
Absolutely. And so that's a huge reduction in that slow wave activity, or put better, I think, is an improvement in the speed and performance.
All right.
And that correlates largely with, and then we can look at it different ways, where this is all of those waves combined together. into one.
Okay.
And originally is on the left, and now on the right, we can see that on the left, there's more disorganization with a lot of
Mhm.
activity in the slower brainwave regions, in 4 to 6 to 8 hertz. And we want most of the dominant brainwaves to be between 8 to 12. That's where we get our peak alpha. It's a really good indicator of brain health. And on the follow-up, we can see that there's much more organization, and we're starting to centralize around a healthy peak alpha frequency, about 9 to 10 hertz, which is totally in the healthy range. But I think the picture that tells a good story is this one. So on this picture, these are all the different regions of the brain as we measure the electrical activity. In the front here is the eyes and the forehead, and then in the back is the back of the head, and left-hand side and right-hand side. So it's just like the brain, but mapped on a picture.
Just mapped out, right?
Flapped, right. And one of the big things that we can see is that the pink area on these curves is much larger on the original brain map. And so we can see that there's been a huge reduction in that slow wave activity throughout pretty much all of the regions. Like areas where there's peaks of this slow power have been reduced, 50% or more already. And so this is a really good sign that Stone is starting to respond well to therapy, and that it's doing what it's supposed to, which is teaching the brain to turn that dimmer switch back up and then engage more and to be more functional. When we see that slow wave activity, or that much pink and purple, which represent delta and theta brainwaves, it lets us know that there's a dysfunction present there. And so when that's being reduced by large magnitudes, this is why Stone is now reading, and he's starting to pronounce, we were doing 5-syllable words today with him.
Yeah.
And he was starting to really to make it work. And he's been, the progress, it's like every single session, it seems like he's improving in his production of speech. And I'm just waiting for, I think soon we're going to be starting to have real conversations where he's able to, start. And it's gradual, right? These are gradual changes. And that's the beauty of these modalities, are that it's a gradual change, but the real changes that he'll be able to carry with him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, they're not just temporary changes. I mean, this is kind of like fundamental changes that are happening within his brain, and as you said, it's gradual. Stone, of course, would prefer it not be quite so gradual for obvious reasons, right? Yeah,
he's Anthony, but he works hard, and that's, I think, the other part is that we're team members with our clients here, and so when people come in, we want to work together with them. And Stone is an excellent teammate. He works hard and likes working hard, and that's amazing. Testament to his person. This is a really exciting picture. So this is the channel spectra. So similar to what we were just looking at, but I ran a pre and post analysis on.
Can you enlarge that a little bit more?
Yeah, let's see if we can do that.
Zoom in a little bit. It's just a little. Now again, my vision's not so great, but again, I'm thinking of those who are watching YouTube. And for those on audio, we'll try to talk you through this as best we can.
Page width, navigation, column width, page color, layout. So these are the channel spectra, and what we're looking at is the blue line is the pre, and the green line is the post. And what we're looking at the spectra, and also this is about the type of noise that's in the brain. And when a spectra like this one here curves off and is higher like this, it's called the 1/f curve. And we want to see it basically go from the top left-hand side to the bottom right-hand side.
Okay. All right.
So what we're seeing is that the curve is being normalized in almost every single region in Stone's brain. And when the line curves up too much, that's like white noise. So it's like, if you imagine that Stone's brain is a radio station, if there's too much white noise, it's like he's trying to pick up on something, but there's a chainsaw going on in the background.
Right.
Or like he's at a loud coffee shop.
Yeah, so, right.
unable to focus and to hone in as easily. And so what we're seeing is that it's coming and it's getting a much healthier curve, which is improving the neural connections. It's increasing the metabolic efficiency, and it's showing that there is more resilient brain networks. We're not wasting energy on random firing. And so that's seen in pretty much all of his spectra, which is a great indicator of the progress for these neuroplastic changes that we're wanting to see. Looking at it in a different way, we've also got one thing with his apraxia, originally when he went to take one of our reaction time tests, he was not really able to do it.
Yeah.
On the follow-up test, he crushed it, and he was able to really perform well.
I want to elaborate on that, because again, I think that's really important. Again, for people to understand, when Stone went in for the initial brain mapping, as you said, Dr. Nanda, part of it was this reaction test, right? Which is, kind of a standard type of a test where he was asked, patients are asked, you have to click on the mouse whenever you see green go, right? It's kind of like red stop, green go, and kind of flashing across the screen. So it's supposed to, measure your reaction time, as you said, and accuracy and all that, I would imagine. Again, when Stone first went in February, he really struggled to do it at all, because just the disconnect was so strong. He couldn't click the mouse in any regular basis. So we kind of went with plan B, which is you kind of helped, because he was able to respond pretty well to vocal cues, and he has been his whole life. That makes it a little easier to skip that step, right, where with his brain. So you were kind of vocally telling him green, go, and
Right.
he was doing it that, which at least gave you the baseline, to get the baseline data. And it was remarkable to see when he went in for the second round doing that test, that he sat down and he just started to go. I mean, he just was able to click, he understood, of course, like he did before, but he was actually, again, his body was able to do what his brain was telling him to do. Now, did he go from 0 to 100%? Of course not. But he was doing it, and doing it, again, at least from an observational standpoint, pretty darn accurately. And again, if there were multiple times that the green was would go a couple of times, he would click a couple of times. And again, it was just really profound to watch that, again, from my standpoint as a witness. And even more importantly, how he felt afterwards. Remember, he's bouncing off the wall because he feels it. He's feeling those changes of having control over his body.
Absolutely. And I love the stories that you shared about how his movements are improving as well, and how things are getting easier for him, just with the coordination and motor planning as well. But that's the beautiful thing about improving the brain, is when you improve some areas, they all will improve because the networks are improving. And so all of these changes. Seen another way, the original was on the left here, and on the right is his follow-up, where you can see that it's starting to organize much cleaner. We want to see it phase lock. We want to see a red blob here on the bottom and then a blue blob over the top of it. They look like Rorschachs, but it tells us about the brain's efficiency. And originally, and this is maybe the apraxia right here, where the brain isn't able to organize efficiently and focus on the task that it wants to get done, and which can, I'm sure, be really frustrating. But it's starting to organize and develop the correct firing pattern, which is another indicator of tremendous progress. Looking at the waveform pattern, originally we can see there's still chaos. There's still disorganization.
Yeah.
But it's highly disorganized in the way that it's coming. But now we're starting to get a much nicer, cleaner activation. So this is looking at all of the channels of the brain as he goes to perform this test, and it's a really great indicator of performance of the brain. And the follow-up is starting to look much, much, much more organized and efficient, which is also really good. And then kind of the last picture is just this. The pre is here on the left and the post is on the right. And the biggest thing we're excited about is that the delta and theta, or that slow wave activity, has been significantly reduced.
Yeah, you can see a big change in the colors there.
Yeah. And so and then also in the alpha, it was in the front of his brain. And alpha is good if you're being present in the now moment, but it can also be spacey and difficult to focus and to use your brain for, life things, problem solving and interacting with others. And so having that being reduced in the frontal part of the brain is also another great indicator of these improvements.
Super.
That's a lie.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But again, it kind of shows, I mean, from a data standpoint and visually, some of the changes that you're seeing that you're able to track to kind of say, hey, that we are on track, that we're, not just the stories that I'm sharing and that Stone is sharing in terms of how he's, improving in a lot of these different areas, but you're able to see it in the brain itself.
Well, and that's one of why I'm so passionate about what we do, is that we can actually measure improvements in the health of the brain.
Yeah.
Something like, I mean, B12 shots are great, but what's the progress? Maybe, what's happening in the body. And with
That's it, right? Like, and as much as you can tell, right?
And so we're able to see these changes, and then also in the office, watch as he is blossoming.
Yeah, and that was gonna be again, just one of my candid questions. I mean, talk about kind of your personal observations. Like I said, 2.5 months or so into this, what changes have you seen in Stone, from kind of his emotional regulation or just response, anything like that?
Yeah, it's been just a really amazing opportunity for us to witness Stone, being the incredible human that he is, to start to see him come out of his shell little by little,
Yeah.
really getting to see the young man, just the amazing human that he is. And so, yeah, we've been able to see the progress and just the dedication that he has to really continue to grow and improve and progress is unwavering. So
Yeah, he's a committed dude for sure. And
He's
yeah, the confidence, right? I think, to me, if I had to boil it down to one word, just the confidence is really just continuing to soar, and how he loves to share that, right? Like, you guys, after his sessions, how happy he talked about, he's happy, 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 happy.
so
yeah,
happy. And I mean, it's just gradual progress. For originally, I think his first session, it was an achievement for him to say, my name is Stone and I'm smart. And he wanted to get that message out. And I know he's
Right.
going to Harvard Law, and I see it happening for him. He's just progressing in the speech from, trying to do a simple sentence to then we were reading Dr. Seuss, and now he's reading much more advanced words. And slowly but surely, the 2-syllable words that used to slip him up are now getting easier. And then he's starting to nail 3-syllable words and sometimes 4-syllable words on his own. And it's a gradual sloping improvement, which has just been so beautiful. And we commented today just that his usual like vocabulary that he uses when he's even in stimming has gotten much larger, and he's incorporating a much larger variety of different words, and seems to be communicating like at a higher level, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're definitely seeing that open up, and others, his teachers at school, have commented on that as well. Just, there's certain words that will pop up, or things that he'll say, they're intentional, that they'll kind of shoot me a look like, wow, we hadn't heard that before. I kind of it reminds me a lot of the path that we took with spelling too, in terms of the motor improvement, right? In terms of, there was just kind of initial aha moment with spelling, when he was kind of able to show, and again, at that time, with great support, with prompting and a lot of other steps that go into the early steps of spelling, but how he gradually got better and better, and just, kind of flew through the different levels that they have to the point where, again, he's on the cusp of being able to type independently, which is the goal. But now we're on the cusp of, not only being able to hopefully type independently, but get to the point where he can speak independently too. But it's a process, right? Like, and just in that case, like with spelling, he was so determined, as was I, that, we spent hours, practicing and, we're trying to do the same here. We know we've talked about doing practice outside of the clinic as well. These are things that just, practice does make perfect.
Absolutely. And, it's amazing how fast he progressed, I think, with the spelling. Like, how long did it take before you would say that he was able to be fluent once he started using the spelling?
Just a few months, really. I mean, and again, it takes, as you can imagine, it's all over there's a huge range in terms, they call it open, when, they call it open spelling. Some take some take longer than others. And Stone, it took just a couple of months, when he was answering these open-ended questions. And again, it's one of those moments I'll never forget when I just kind of threw caution to the wind, because, they want you to try to progress at kind of a measured level, because one of the things you don't want to do is create frustration. You don't want to create a setback if they feel like they can't answer it right. And it all makes sense. But I remember, like I said, just like it was yesterday, sitting there, I just started asking him just these random questions like, hey, do you know who the president is? Do you know who the last one was? And he just kept getting, answer after answer. And we sat there for like an hour. I mean, I went through everything I could think of: college sports nicknames, favorite football teams, like all kinds of stuff. And that was just, again, mind blowing. Realizing he was at that point. And that's, again, which is kind of when the floodgates really opened to find out what are his passions and all that.
I'm super excited for him to do that with speaking, because I feel like we're getting closer and closer to him starting to be able to just go for what he's thinking and to be able to ask questions. And I think that would be a great, I mean, even that same style of like, once the floodgates come open and he's able to get there, I think it's just going to be just like that, where it'll be a floodgates, and then he'll be telling you everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we can't wait for that. Obviously. Yeah. I think one of the big challenges, frankly, again, and we've talked about this, is the initiation. And this is common with non-speakers and, a lot of those on the spectrum. And I think it's really kind of a result of both kind of the system and trauma that they've kind of been through over the years, where they've had to be so compliant, right? Like, and they didn't have a voice of their own. So like there really wasn't the motivation or a way for them to initiate things and for it to be recognized. And so I just think it's one of those things that just kind of makes sense, where you think about yourself, if you spent even a year or 2 years where you couldn't ask for something, literally you couldn't ask for something, it'd be kind of hard to retrain yourself to say, hey, I can do this. And I think that kind of goes across the board for communication, where he'll get there, but it's almost like, the brain has to realize, oh, I can ask for this, or I can say this. I could just say this, and, there's going to be a response. I think that takes time.
It's there. Like, I mean, you were saying that, after you went to a fun dance with Stone the other day, you were just driving around and then asking him to tell you what things were, pointing at different things, and he's able to start to do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was on cloud 9 after that dance. He was just super jazzed. And yeah, even on his own, he was kind of hanging out the window, just saying stars, green trees, green leaves, and just wanting to kind of show off on his own. Like, hey, I can see things, I can say them. And was just having a blast doing it. And we've had that multiple times, and it's really special, right? After all these years, for him not being able to do that, have to sit silently or just stimming, like you said. He's had limited usage of words, but again, not always very accurately, as we talked about the brain-body disconnect. The classic, I always talk about when he'd say, hey, what do you want for dinner? He'd say, no pizza. And we'd be like, oh, he doesn't want pizza, when actually he's saying, yes, I want pizza. Like, it's the opposite, which is just a really kind of fascinating trait of the apraxia and how it impacts the body. What would you say to people, to a parent listening or someone who feels stuck or, who's unsure about what step to take or who still may be skeptical?
Well, the baseline that we encourage, and as Dr. Nanda mentioned, it's amazing that this is the one area the one industry that doesn't test the organ that they're treating. But the first step is a brain map, and it really allows us to understand what's going on under the hood. It allows us to crunch that data and really understand where the areas are that can use some optimization, where the connections are that need to be reconnected. And it's a great starting place to just get a baseline understanding.
With anything that's going on with the brain, there's the psychological aspect, and then there's the physiological residue. So there's what's underneath as a result that can often, and then it's the chicken or the egg, right? But it's the knowledge of how the brain is performing is so
Yeah.
just to have an idea of exactly what's going on, and then to be involved in some type of brain-based therapy, whether it's anxiety, depression, help schizophrenics. It's just so helpful to actually help the brain to work better, and that's really what it is. Like, we're not even necessarily treating autism, right? We're just helping the brain to work better, targeting areas that are going to make Stone's brain work better. Or for
Yeah.
individual, we're just balancing and improving the function of the organ. And it's a blessing, and it's something that I wish, personally, right? Used it for my own ADD that I had forever and got off Adderall medications, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And that's, a personal win that I've had, but we've had lots of other clients who have gotten off anxiety medication or Adderall or other drugs. And it's a natural alternative to help the brain to work better. And that's just, it's a no-brainer.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about if we use this time to go ahead and share a tip of the week?
Hey parents, gather around, it's time to speak. We're here with your tip of the week. Strategies and wisdom just for you. Autism parents, we know what you go through.
All right, and it's time for our tip of the week. This is when we like to share a little wisdom and knowledge with everyone else. I don't know if you guys have a tip of the week to share, but mine's pretty straightforward, and that is just to remember that progress doesn't always take a leap, like we were saying. It often looks like calm, clarity, fewer meltdowns, subtle changes, right? Small baby steps, but change is change, and progress is progress. And you celebrate each and every one because it's special, and it shows that change, it shows that progress is possible.
Amazing.
That's great. I think that's wisdom right there. And believing in the possibility and expecting that there will be improvements, I think, is with that belief and the continued effort, knowing that that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. How about if we go ahead and just jump ahead to our fact or fiction?
Get QuickTime ready, and here we go. This is Autism Fact or Fiction. We're breaking down what's real, what's rumor, and what might surprise you. Let's go.
All right, now it's time for our fact or fiction, where we come up with a statement, some type of a stereotype or maybe a belief that may be out there, and talk about whether it's fact or fiction. So again, I always offer you guys first dibs. Do you have any fact or fiction that you want to share?
You go first.
Okay. Well, mine is kind of obvious. It's the fact or fiction. Non-speakers can't benefit from brain-based therapy because they can't express how they're feeling.
Fiction.
Yeah, big time fiction, right? Like, again, we can talk about, you can see with data, right? With the tools and with the brain mapping, not to mention those who can communicate through letterboards or whatever, but you actually have data that can kind of show that the therapy is working in the areas that it's targeted towards. in addition to them experiencing their own transformation and through their own experience.
Nice.
It's okay if you don't have one.
Well, I mean, I like the one how about all autistic people have intellectual disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fiction, right? We know that
Yeah.
highly gifted in many different areas. And yeah.
That's been debunked big time. And especially, again, particularly within the non-speaking community, right? I think is where you've seen that most pervasive, unfortunately. That assumption is there that because of their challenges that they weren't able to communicate. And so the presumption was that they were intellectually delayed or, somehow disabled.
Right. Oh, I fully believe now that everyone is a highly intelligent being.
Yeah, I mean, we're just seeing evidence, so much evidence coming out in all types of situations, right? With those who have different types of conditions or disabilities, but still can show that they are still, from a cognitive standpoint, highly capable.
Okay, here's one. Fact or fiction? Stone has been an intricate leader in the community and has already helped to change other non-speakers' lives.
Big time fact. Yeah, I love that one. And yeah, thanks for pointing that out. It's something that, obviously I'm super proud of. And it's just amazing to see. He takes that very seriously. That is something he's really driven by, that he wants to be a leader. He does that with his groups. He has a weekly Zoom call, Spellers Ohana. He loves to take a leadership role with that, share information he's been sharing with them, talking to his friends about the brain enhancement therapy, encouraging them to check it out and talking about how it's directly impacted him because they've asked him questions. So yeah, that's a great example. All right, well, one more segment that I want to include, which is the parent confession.
Morning routines can go astray. Found socks in the fridge one day. Laughter's the best remedy. Hey, we're just finding our own way. Mom, dad confessions every week. Sharing joys and moments we seek. Honest tales that make us unique. Join the club, we're never meek. Tooth fairy left a whole pizza.
All right, now it's time for parent confessions. This is when we get to fess up to something that either happened in the distant past or maybe not so distant past. And for me, I've got one not so distant past. And again, that's something you guys were there for. And that was the first time hearing Stone reading a book. I cried.
Oh, that was a great moment.
That was a great moment.
Yeah. And, I'm about ready to hear too, but it's, something you never think would ever happen. To see something like that happen in front of you is just amazing.
Yeah, beautiful moment.
We're all going to cry when Stone gives his speech.
Right. Yeah, it's going to happen, right? I mean, we know he's talked about that. He's going to give his speech. He's got his future mapped out, and we've learned not to doubt him at all. Like I say, he's a very determined young man, and he's going to blaze a trail for many others that we're really excited about. All right. Anything else you guys want to share on this episode? Save me from, embarrassing myself anymore from crying.
We really appreciate having us on and really have enjoyed getting to know you and the family and Stone, of course. And we're looking forward to continuing to work together.
Yeah, it's been great. And again, just as I mentioned in the last episode, again, full disclosure, what began as kind of a personal journey has turned into a professional partnership of sorts in terms of working together. I'm super excited to lend my expertise and experience. I was speaking the devil. Yeah. Hey. All right, go for it. To work together and help you guys with your marketing, again, as a client. Something obviously I believe in strongly, personally and professionally, and looking forward to bringing it to the masses and helping other individuals and other families.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having us on, David.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our powerful story. Like I said, Stone's journey isn't about a miracle. It's about possibility. It's about what happens when we support the brain, honor the body, and believe in communication beyond what we've been taught to expect. So thank you guys again for your insights and your heart, and everyone listening. If you're walking a similar path, I see you. I hope this gives you hope and maybe even a little extra steps in your own journey. So until next time, we'll catch you later on the lighter side of the spectrum.
Good day.